an email was sent to the Psychedelic Club of Denver stating from Denver, I believe from Excise and Licenses, who handles all of the social consumption, cannabis licensing in the city. And they were like, oh, we've been notified that you are planning on having a consumption event without a permit.
I do know that you have worked in the cannabis and psychedelic space for a little bit now here in Colorado. So do you mind if we just kind of, expand on the conversation a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
So when the bio you sent over, you had listed yourself as a psychedelic policy advisor. Would you expand on what that actually is?
Sure. I'm creating it as I go. So what that
many
means...
people are. Many people are.
Exactly. So, when I worked at Vicente Cedarburg, I was a member of the Psychedelic Policy Work Group. I've been, in my past job, I was looking a lot in the Oregon licensing, rulemaking procedures, so things like that. Colorado, we are going to be having pretty in-depth rulemaking for the Natural Medicine Act. We have the advisory board that's obviously working, but as we get closer to the actual implementation and licensing structure, we're going to need to, there's going to be a lot of things that get kind of hashed out, for lack of a better word. And so, I'm trying to find my way of helping to kind of helping to get the conversation moving towards harm reduction, education, actually talking about the things that matter rather than some of this, talking about the actual science and the mushrooms and the substances that we're dealing with, and less so some of the other stuff that goes on around kind of how these programs are implemented and all of that. So I don't know. I'm going to try and carve my lane out and see what happens. As far as, from a business perspective, I've been, talking with some of the businesses around psychedelics and outside of psychedelics as to how Colorado's shaping out, how the licensing structure is going to play out, and, kind of looking at the Oregon model and doing some analyses.
I listened to a interview podcast today, and the speaker was saying that, essentially we can expect new laws around this, every year for the next 5, 6, 7 years to keep up with what is going on. Mm-hmm. Hopefully versions of those laws will be released earlier in the legislative session than they were this year, where it became a must pass, and a lot of the people who voted for it didn't even have a chance to fully go through and understand it. So I believe you attended Psychedelic Science this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been asking all our guests. It was the largest psychedelic conference ever here in Denver. I believe some of the numbers were about 12,000 or so. For you, what do you feel was the best part of the conference? What was the worst part of the conference? And what surprised you the most?
So I got to go with Psychedelic Club of Denver, actually. They had a booth, and so I got to do 2 days there, mostly manning the booth. So I was mostly in the exposition hall. But I went in, I don't know if I was optimistic. I was cautious, I guess, about what to expect. And as soon as I walked in, I was just I was blown away. I thought it was just the gathering of all the people. And I was there with a mission. I was looking for sponsors and connections and things like that in the mushroom realm. But seeing all the different mushroom stuff that was out, for me, that was the best part. Between Full Canopy had the whole mushroom, Full Canopy and Wonder Bags, had the gallery in the middle of the thing, and Denver Spore Company and a lot of the other local. There were a lot of really small local people who shelled out a good bit of cash to get there. And I just thought my favorite part was seeing all of the kind of local Colorado stuff that I didn't know about. And I've been calling people for a couple months now and Googling and looking at stuff and meeting all these cool new people in Colorado. That was probably the best part for me. I'd say, I guess did we say worst part?
Not best.
The not best part for me was the Well, there was a couple, but the way that and maybe this may not have even been part of MAPS, but the way that they treated the exposition, the people with the booths, I think it was like $165 for like a one-way trip with a cart. So we didn't take carts. We brought all of our stuff in by hand from the light rail so that we didn't have to pay an exorbitant amount of money just to move our tables into the venue. I don't know if I don't think it's a MAPS thing actually at all. I think it's
I can't say for sure, but that is typical of what you would find from a union shop. And I know that there were a lot of rules placed on the conference based on, the expense of what running over time would cost from the union. So
I think that's right.
I don't know for sure, but I would think that it was probably union.
Yeah. I think maybe, I think if we're doing it again next year, which I hope we are. I don't see why we wouldn't. It was huge. I hope maybe there's some exceptions made for like nonprofits or some of the smaller, because some of the companies there are massive, giant organizations. Some of them are Psychedelic Club of Denver, where we took the light rail from Katie's house, 2 stops, carrying all of our stuff and backpacks. Luckily, downtown Denver in the middle of the day is easy parking. Coming from DC, it's easy for me. So I was able to get my car up pretty close to get things out. That was probably the thing that I think just, having a little more, and obviously the venue is the venue. If it's union rates, it's union rates. But having a little more grace for some of the community organizations and stuff like that, I think would be super, would go a long way. And then
What surprised you the most about the conference?
What surprised me most was how kind of I felt like everyone was there was pretty much, I don't know if awe is the right word, but everyone was like, it seemed was just like, jaw on the floor, just like, this is awesome that this is happening. I mean, I haven't seen that many mushrooms out in the world. I haven't seen that many ketamine things and different stuff. I mean, I think some of it's, I think with anything, right? There's some that's questionable, some that's better operators than others, but for the most part, I've never seen anything. I mean, like, it was like a Grateful Dead show, but with like suits and ties. It reminded me of going to like shows as a young, like in high school and looking around and being like, how is this possible? Yeah. And now it's just people who I worked for and who, make a lot more money than I do, also just walking around in it, and that was I think the most kind of special thing for me.
When I look back, in my late teens, early 20s, and kind of imagine the future, like I always knew cannabis would be legalized, but I certainly never had any of the faintest idea that we would see the type of progress we have and have, just an absolutely massive convention dedicated to psychedelics.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. I think, it's the same thing. I really, cannabis was always like, okay, this is going to happen. I viewed it as the, incrementalist progression towards, right, the drug wars. It's still in full swing in a lot of the country and a lot of Colorado and all of that stuff, but it is, I think, slowly being eroded by people learning about this stuff and seeing what it does. And right, the conversations around ketamine are, people call it a horse tranquilizer. Ketamine's on the WHO list of mandatory drugs for countries. It's one of those things that it's not the way that we have been taught about these things and the way that they've been talked about and the way, honestly, that we talk about them amongst ourselves even has, I think, created such a crazy stigma that like we're now unraveling it. Because the science is just like, it's too good. It's just, you can't fight when they're seeing this over and over and over, and you're seeing all of these different, Johns Hopkins or MAPS or all of the other studies that are going on. They're all going towards the same thing, and it's not make this illegal because it's dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, being in awe, that's a perfect way to describe it. I was definitely in awe at the conference. And thank you so much for manning the Psychedelic Club of Denver booth, volunteering your time. I volunteered, but it wasn't hard. Right. But still, it's a volunteer organization, and it's a valuable nonprofit. And the weekend after Psychedelic Science, Psychedelic Club of Denver hosted their Mindful Marketplace, which is a big community event. I've attended it before. It's very family friendly. They have lots of vendors and educational talks and music, and it's held at the Sports Castle. And so I was absolutely shocked when I read a Westward article and then a Denver Post article about how that event, which was very much an affordable, free event for the community, received a warning for open consumption when that was clearly not an open consumption event. It was very much a very free and affordable response to psychedelic science.
Yeah, right, and it was It was the Saturday after the conference, and so we got a lot of people to come. That was a big reason why we were at the conference. So the warning, there was not enough context within either of the articles to clarify what it was. We didn't really get a warning, so to speak. It was an email was sent to the Psychedelic Club of Denver, stating from Denver, I believe from Excise and Licenses, who handles all of the social consumption cannabis licensing in the city, and they were like, "Oh, we've been notified that you are planning on having a consumption event without a permit." And I believe it was Amber. Yes, it was Amber, put together a very eloquent response and said, "We're not doing that." And the city said, "Okay, thank you." And that was it. That was the end. No one came. There was no consumption. It was a non-consumption event. And that was the end of it until the article just came out. I do think that someone at Psychedelic Club is going to reach out at some point to just kind of clarify what happened, because some of the businesses and stuff in there were legitimately cited and, had received warnings for, I think, activities that had occurred. Ours was super proactive. So it was something that we were asked by the city before the event even occurred. We told them we weren't, and nothing happened, and that was it. It wasn't, and then just like the Psychedelic Cup, it won't be an unlicensed consumption event because we are not allowing consumption at the event. And so, but other than that, I mean, the only other thing we noticed was that your Psychedelic Club, it was listed within the businesses. Psychedelic Club of Denver is a 501c3 in its own right. It's a nonprofit. So, it's something I think we want to clarify is that, like, we're not a business. We are not making, profits off of this. We are a nonprofit fundraising, and any of the money that comes out of this, any of the proceeds that are after the budget, after the event's paid for, are going to go to all of our kind of programmatic stuff: Narcan, naloxone supplies, fentanyl strips, testing, substances, things like that. So, it's just, I don't know. My wife sent it to me too, and she's like, "What is this?" And I was like, I didn't think anything was coming of this, but I guess it did. I don't know. We'll see what happens, whether or not we get something similar, or whether or not we reach out to the city and kind of see. We'll kind of play it by ear.
Yeah, that was interesting.
It was a very interesting enforcement. I worked with Denver Normal many years ago, and certainly we interacted with Colorado Normal a lot, and they've been doing the same thing they've been doing for the past 10 years, and it was just kind of a surprise to see that at this very moment with a lot of things going on in the city, that they decided to go after a nonprofit that has very little budget, that really doesn't do too much besides try to shape, cannabis laws in order to help medical patients. And so it's interesting that it also comes at a time of change in the mayor's office for the first time in 12 years here in Denver. So hopefully somebody will do some investigation and kind of figure out what was the precipice for all of this.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll, see some, clarity from the city. Because, if it's not a warning. We didn't get a warning. We got an inquiry, I think is what we're going to call it. So it didn't even go to a warning. It was just an email. I mean, and this could be something that was brought up via a CORA request, so a Colorado Opens Record Act, via the people, via the reporters. It could be coming from any I don't know. It could be coming from anywhere. It just sort of, irks us a little that it's out there.
Yeah. And thank you for clarifying, because the articles were...
they lumped us in.
Yeah.
They lumped Psychedelic Club in with, I think, some of the others that did have legitimate, fines and like actions taken. But we didn't. Yeah. And we're not going to.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, I think it was just a list.
It was just a list of, I think, 10 businesses, but didn't clarify us. It's fine.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
Perfect. So we are going to take a quick break here for 5 minutes and see if we have any questions from our audience. And we are going to be closing out here very shortly. So come on back.
And if you do have questions, please write them on a Post-it note and bring them up to us, and we'll answer those after the break. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions. We have some really great questions to read and discuss, and we appreciate your enthusiasm. Let's see what you want to know about the Psychedelic Club.
So our first question actually isn't about the Psychedelic Club, but I know there's a lot of questions around with the implementation of the bill that you are not allowed to publicly display your mushrooms. Now, I've heard various opinions about what that actually means, and I assume that you believe that does not include showing mushrooms at a private event like the Psychedelic Cup.
Yep, correct. And we are, we're going to, as I've said ad nauseum, we're going to rely a lot on the cannabis stuff, right? So the private event rules that they had around, now that we're talking about consumption, it now seems bad. But in any event, right, there were the rules where the sort of you could have things that were private that you could sell tickets for, and those do not count as sort of a public event, right? So a restaurant or a bar, anyone can walk into. MAPS, you could argue was potentially public, given the fact that like there was no security at all.
But that was before the implementation.
Yes.
So a lot of the new rules went into effect this July 1st.
Right. So the public display thing, we're not going to be selling tickets there. We're going to be having it. It's going to be upstairs. It's not going to be out the windows. It's not going to be on the street. We're not going to be allowing people from the street to come into the event, so there's really no public display. Everyone there knows what is going for and is making the decision to go. Everyone's going to be 21 and over. We'll check IDs at the door, that kind of stuff. So there's really no public display because it's not. No one in the general public, other than people who are buying tickets, are going to have any sort of view of anything.
So a couple days before the law went into effect, Ashley went to a TV studio and showed Laura Ingram's audience her mushrooms. Would she still be able to do this with the new rules that went into effect?
No. Probably not. Because those, I don't know. It would be hard to say because, was it on TV?
It was.
Yes.
National television. Live national television. Fox News. 3 million viewers.
I would probably say, yeah. You probably couldn't do that. No. I think that it would be, without having it in front of me to look at if there's any clarifying language.
I don't believe there is any clarifying.
Yeah, then I don't think you would be allowed to do that. Now, what that would mean for like educational purposes, I don't really know.
Right. So I have a follow-up question. What if Steve Fenberg said I could? Like in the hallway outside the hearing, he assured me that the law was not meant to prevent me from using mushrooms as an educational tool or go after like my social media or television appearances, because before this I was on Dr. Phil and did the same thing.
So I kind of want to back up. I don't think the act of having the mushrooms on camera for the public to see would count as public display. I do think that if the audience there is just a public audience, if you were on the plaza at the Today Show or something like that,
It was just a camera. It was just a cameraman and a hairdresser and myself that were viewing her, but it was a national audience.
I think that would be fine. I kind of take it back. I think that would be okay, but it's hard. I don't know. And but as a lawyer, whatever Senator Fenberg says, which I'm sure he has all the best intentions in the world, doesn't matter. It just matters what's in the bill and the way that the criminal justice system chews things up and spits it out the way that it wants to. So whatever the law says is great and all, but once you're in sort of the maelstrom of the state versus you, things get wonky. So I would recommend talking to a lawyer before you show mushrooms on TV moving forward, and don't rely on elected officials to tell you what things might mean or not mean.
That's really good legal advice.
It's not legal advice.
It's not legal advice. That's
but
really
it's advice to do legal things.
Yeah.
And as much as the implementation was aimed at providing a lot of clarity, I think some of the language has actually increased a lot of confusion where a lot of the items in the bill, we talked to 6 or 7 different lawyers and are getting 6 or 7 different answers. So,
I mean, that's a result of, it's a new system. People don't know what to do. And like you said earlier, it will keep evolving as people learn about the different things. But it's also a result of the drug, like the war on drugs and the way that all of the CSA, the Controlled Substances Act, the way that operates, right? So it's the way Delta 8 THC is now legal, or different research chemicals are, they're not illegal. You can't really sell them, but they're not illegal because they're not enumerated within the CSA. And so you can constantly have the spices and all of these different alternative drugs popping up that don't hit the exact little thing in it.
And so we're just trying to figure out if Ashley showing her mushrooms to, a national television audience, are we going to have whoever's broadcasting that not broadcast that in Colorado? Or is she going to have to go over the border?
I don't know, but right? I mean, but what if Discovery Channel is showing a thing on psilocybin mushrooms? But what if they have something? Is that a public display of mushrooms in Colorado via television? I don't know. I mean, it's not advertising, right? It's not advertising that you're selling mushrooms. That's explicitly prohibited. I think it'll need to be clarified. I think there's a lot of gray areas on liquid culture, on mycelium versus fruiting things. I think the natural medicine and 290 don't really define stuff the way it needs to be defined, given what we know now about mushrooms and how it sort of works and how it's grown and how it is propagated and inoculated and all of that stuff. So I think as things progress, there'll be more people in the room who know what is actually going on. We saw it with cannabis. Jonathan Singer, former rep, always said to regulate cannabis like the drug that it is, not the drug that you're afraid of it or afraid of it to be. So having psilocybin, having people in the room who actually know what they're talking about, right? And we had a lot of advocates and a lot of lobbyists on the mushroom side advocating, and I think a lot of that was largely, I think it helped push things forward in a way that whatever, the faults and things about 290 and the criticisms that people say, I think that 290 has created a much more clarity than the Natural Medicine Health Act. So I do think that there are some things that 290 has helped with, but I think it's just going to be evolving. I also think that the way that we have our system set up is going to be kind of full of contradictions, and it's just going to be, this might not work, we'll have to do this. This might not work, we'll have to do this. Instead of having a more liberal program, we're going to start with a more conservative program, and it'll progress, hopefully.
It is going to be a wild ride, and I know we're all very excited about it. So that's all the time we have for today. We hope you have learned something and enjoyed this conversation. Today we've talked about the upcoming Psychedelic Cup hosted by the Psychedelic Club of Denver, with Jonathan Cherkoss. If our listeners would like to reach out and contact you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out for the cup, the best way is to sign up online at the website, copsychedeliccup.com, and you can send an email to copsychedeliccup@gmail.com. And yeah, from there, you can reach out to me about sponsorships, club stuff, info@pcodenver.com or whatever it is. The link will be posted. To learn more about membership, to hear about our, monthly meetings where we have, people don't need to be a member to come to the meetings. So it's a great place to kind of learn and talk and do all this stuff. But, that's pretty much where you should reach me at.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We appreciate your time and all of this great information. This is going to be such an exciting event. We're so stoked for it. If you want to find out more information about our podcast, you can check it out at mocktailsandmushrooms.com. You can subscribe. Please leave us a review. We appreciate your support and feedback. Thank you so much for listening to Mocktails and Mushrooms, the podcast where we chat about everything mushroom related, from healing to tripping, law to lore, with humor and insight. I'm Ashley Ryan.
And I am Jimmy Smurs.
And this is Mocktails and Mushrooms.
Signing off.
Much love.